This week on The Week Ahead, we look at December unemployment numbers and what could be deceiving about them. Plus, we speak with freshman Congressman Todd Rokita of Indiana about his plans. Welcome to The Week Ahead. I'm Frank McCaffrey. Unemployment numbers in this country have been high for a long time, but they showed a drop in December. However, like a lot of numbers, this can be misleading. For more on this, we're joined by Americans for Limited Government Communications Director Rick Manning. Rick, you are a public affairs chief of staff with the Department of Labor. What can you tell us about the unemployment rate?
Well, Frank, I can tell you that the unemployment rate is somewhat misleading. Literally about 60% of the unemployment rate drop is due to people leaving the workforce. That's 434,000 people, almost 500,000 people decided that they didn't have any faith that they could find a job. They lost hope and they left the workforce. That's an extremely bad sign for America. It's an extremely bad sign going forward.
Rick, can you put the unemployment rate into perspective? How many of the people out there aren't working?
Well, there are 14.5 million people who are unemployed under the way that they count the people, but there's millions more who have chosen to drop out of the system. Additionally, there are another 6 million people who are in part-time jobs who want to have a full-time job. When you put it all into context, there are more people unemployed or have a part-time job who want a full-time job than live in the entire state of Florida.
Do you anticipate a dramatic turnaround in unemployment numbers for 2011?
Well, I think Ben Bernanke made it pretty clear that he sees no real improvement in the unemployment rate. I think it's really difficult to project that. However, what I do know is that our government is continually looking at ways to try to go after small business, the very job creators. The regulations that are being put into place related to Obamacare, related to a lot of the employment standards, the number of new inspectors that are being hired to be able to go out and really harass businesses are not going to help our situation. Also, our tax system is structured in such a way that it really does encourage people to send jobs overseas. For instance, U.S. corporations pay the highest corporate tax rate in the world, the highest in the world. It's no wonder that we see jobs being shipped overseas when it costs so much money to produce goods and services here. And at some point, our Congress is going to have to get serious about getting the tax rate into alignment with what the rest of the world is doing.
All right, thank you very much, Rick. There are a number of enthusiastic new lawmakers in Washington. We spoke with Todd Rokita of Indiana. He's a freshman congressman last week, the day of his inauguration, about what his plans are for the future.
I'm not here. I'm not celebrating here. I'm coming here out of a sense of duty.
Congressman Todd Rokita recognizes that he has a lot to learn about life at the national level, but he has concepts from the state level he'd like to bring to D.C.
Indiana's had a great success story, and coming from the executive branch of a state government, a government that has to balance its budget every time under our Constitution, I think there's also some things that we can offer. So I want to inject those things into the debate. I haven't heard anyone talk about cutting or furloughing any of these federal employees. Indiana's employees haven't had a raise for 3 years. I'm running, or had run my budget on $1987. Can you imagine if this place was running on $1987?
Rokita recognizes that Washington can be a difficult place to introduce spending cuts, and spending cuts are a must with our federal government.
If you think of these programs as a pipeline, and the pipeline starts here in Washington, D.C. with all these bureaucrats, and then the pipeline goes on to the bureaucrats that are in the states. And at the end of the pipeline is a little trickle of any kind of perceived or real benefit that the taxpayer gets for that program. They're going to cut off that trickle first. And so I think we have to be very careful to say, no, we want these bureaucrats to be furloughed. We want these bureaucrats to take the pain that the private sector has to take.
The Indiana District 4 rep is asking his constituents to hold him accountable, and he tells us what he wants them to hold him accountable for.
That I voted for everything I campaigned on, that I voted to repeal Obamacare, that I voted for measures that inject private sector free market principles into America's healthcare system, which I believe is the best in the world. If I voted for a balanced budget, if I voted for a balanced budget constitutional amendment, if I voted for a constitutional cap on spending.
Rokita announced he'd run for office in 2010 when incumbent Steve Buyer decided to retire. And now we turn to a look at possible spending cuts for our government. Congress has introduced a bill to cut 5% of every congressional office's budget. The cut could save taxpayers $35 million in 2011. This is an attempt to roll back at least some of the spending from our federal government. And that's all the time we have for the week ahead. Please join us again next time. For more on these and other topics, visit our webpage, getliberty.org.